G'day and welcome to part 2 of the module on shifting gears between work and home life. I'm Dom Hilbrink, one of the clinicians that works for Fortin. I want to start by acknowledging that we're all meeting today virtually on different parts of traditional Aboriginal lands. I'm speaking to you from Bidjigal country and would like to acknowledge the Bidjigal people's enduring connection to this land and honour their rich cultural traditions. I also want to acknowledge lived experience of mental ill health for anyone in ACT corrections. I want to acknowledge the value of your participation and the importance of your insights in improving our understanding of wellbeing and mental health. I also want to acknowledge your families, friends, and other support people as part of that lived experience. Before we start, just want to acknowledge again that everyone who watches this presentation will be in a different place mentally and emotionally. So just a reminder to be mindful that whenever we talk about topics around mental health and well-being, this can potentially raise difficult feelings or reminders of challenging events. So just give yourself a little extra attention on how you're traveling and tune in to anything that changes for you as you work through this module. If needed, have some things around you that you can use to ground yourself, or take a minute to pause or stretch or get some fresh air as needed. You can make a mental note of someone you can touch base with if something comes up you need to talk about. And also feel free to reach out to your wellbeing staff or to us here at Fordham if you have any questions about the presentation. So just recapping the goals for this module around improving awareness about the boundaries we have between work and home, and exploring rituals and routines that enhance the transition between work and home in a way that focuses on well-being. So here's an overview of what we'll cover in this video. We're looking at ways of switching over between work and home and the challenges that might be involved in that, and some goals that might also be involved in switching over. We'll look at ways of simple practices around mindful decompression from the workday, transitioning from work to home on difficult days, and ways to level up and activate the soothe system that we talked about in part 1 of this module. And then finally, we'll look at some specific examples of rituals to help us switch over between work and home. So I understand that some of you will be doing shift work and others are working in a hybrid model between home and office. And there's different challenges in each of those situations. General challenges between switching over between work and home include balancing family time with me time, with commitments and chores and things like that. Managing physical and mental fatigue from the workday, and having energy for other things after work shift. There may also be personal challenges that are happening in your home environment that you'll have to manage as you move into that environment. And of course, maintaining routines is important, but there also needs to be space for spontaneity in our day as well. So for those doing shift work, some of the challenges in switching over from work to home can be sort of managing the unpredictability of the workday. You may be stepping back into family, the home environment at tricky times during the daily routine. Shift work obviously can have an impact on your sleep routines. And you may also feel out of sync with the people in your life. If you're working from home, obviously there can be a challenge in the blurring of boundaries between work and home, managing work creeping into your home time. And there can be distractions and multiple commitments in the home environment as well. And the other thing is there can be the lack of a natural buffer in a commute between work and home life if you're working from home. So really, I think there's two kind of broad goals in switching over from work to home. One is how you disconnect from work, and that means physically sort of changing space. but also in this day and age, digitally as well. Sometimes work can follow us digitally into our home lives. Um, we also need to disconnect mentally and emotionally from the workplace. Sometimes feelings or thoughts can stay with us from the workday, and it's important to think about how we actively decompress so that we complete the stress cycle and we're not carrying stress from work into too much into our home life. And then the other part of the other goal around switching over is around connecting with the good stuff in our lives. This can be obviously our loved ones, but also favorite activities, connecting with nature, all of the stuff that recharges us and that's important to us. And ideally, we want to be able to switch over and connect rather than just switch off. So I just want to recap something that was covered in the stress and burnout module, and that's the idea of completing the stress cycle. When we have challenging events, these are stressors that can activate certain reactions, obviously activate the body in a certain way, certain emotions and things like that. And these stimulate our coping responses, whether they be automatic or trained things, things that we do just to get through difficult experiences, ways that we reach out to other people and things like that. But important, and arguably the most important part of this cycle is the recovery part. We need to give attention to how we recover from stressful days so that we're not carrying, we don't have carryover stress that kind of follows us and builds up from one stressful event to the next. So we want to try to build into our work to home rituals and routines ways that we recover from stress. So we do this through a process of mindful decompression, being conscious about, allowing some time to unwind um, and and complete the stress cycle and decompress from the day. So I want to acknowledge that you may be transitioning from a stressful work day, or you might be transitioning into a busy or stressful home environment. And this makes acknowledging needs that we talked about in part one even more important, and thinking about small and doable ways that we can decompress and kind of refuel. So we want to plan and be deliberate about creating this buffer between work and home, and really adjusting it to whatever works and whatever fits our needs. So we really want to ask ourselves, how do I get a break from work? And what type of break do I need? So even something as small as 2 minutes of just sitting, breathing, being outside, listening to a song that either relaxes us or energizes us, just really, getting to know what we need and what works for us, and adjusting our responses to the way our needs change depending on how our day went. So it's also important that we communicate with the people that we live with about our needs and expectations during this transition time. That way, we're giving people around us a chance to respect that time and possibly even participate in it wherever possible. So what follows here is, a selection of tools and strategies that you can incorporate into your work and home transition time. And I want you to consider this as a kind of menu that you can select from and tailor to your life and circumstances, not something that you have to follow to the letter. So another thing that was covered in the stress and burnout module was this idea of SUDS. And I want us to think about this as a kind of self-check-in that we can do as the start of a work to home transition routine. So as explained in the other module, SUDS stands for Subjective Units of Distress Scale. which is really just a fancy way of saying how stressed am I feeling at the moment, and using a scale from 0, which is no stress or distress, to 10, which is the most amount of stress or distress we can imagine, as a quick and easy way to kind of check in and rate how am I feeling. And again, as I discussed in part 1, we really want to include in this practice, what do I need? What are the needs associated with where I'm at the moment? You know, what are my needs when I'm a 5 or a 6 versus a 7 or 8, or even a 9 or a 10? So an example of how we can map our response and think about what we need based on where we're at on this SUD scale is here on this slide. So different levels of distress need different types of strategies, and it's about matching the strategies to our needs. So for example, if we're right up in kind of the overload zone from, you know, sort of 8 to 10, 7.5, 8 to 10, some of the things that we might need to do in response to where we're at is, for example, taking time out. So sometimes we just need to give ourselves permission or seek permission from the people around us to take time out. And this helps us, especially when we combine it with other strategies, for active self-care. So we can go for a walk, go for a drive, do an activity that is sort of calming, or sometimes, you know, just, you know, take time out and sleep to recharge. Something that can be really helpful to manage stress when stress is really high is short bursts of intense exercise. This helps to burn off stress hormones. And another example of something we can do in this upper range of SUDS, which is a kind of body hack, is to use cold water. This creates an automatic response in our body that really turns the volume down on our stress response in a really quick and effective way. So some people like to jump into a cold shower, or, you know, it can be simple as splashing your face with cold water or something like that. That can be, you know, just take the edge off really high levels of stress and agitation. In that kind of middle range of SUDS, where we're starting to feel activated or you know, kind of stressed, there are other you know, other strategies that we can use to map to our needs. Where when we're in the, you know, sort of 9 and 10, we don't really have the headspace to you know, to talk or process things often. When we're in this middle range, sometimes talking or taking time to think and process can be a really helpful way of discharging stress and reset emotions. Another thing that we can do is focusing on activities that are soothing. And no matter how, you know, old or tough we get, we all still need soothing at times. And I'll be going into more detail about specific ways of doing this later. But one example that a lot of people relate to is spending time with a pet. Pets are really good at tuning in with us, and you know, can be really comforting and soothing to be around. Something else that we can do in this mid-range is to focus on activities that give us a sense of mastery. So this is a way of settling and feeling more in control. And one example that I often do is, you know, if I feel like, you know, there's lots of stuff going on, then just going out and mowing the lawn is, you know, a simple activity that I can do that gives me a sense of achievement and an instant result that just makes me feel more contained and in control. So when our SUDS are down in the lower range, when we've got lower levels of stress, our needs in that range are different, and that's where we can sort of engage with pleasant activities to kind of add to where we're at and to fill the tank and boost our energy. Getting a good dose of this good stuff fills the tank and helps our resilience. So it's really about banking things for for when we need them when things get more stressful. Um, Connecting is one of the most powerful levers of well-being there is, both generally and after stressful events. And so just thinking about connecting in a way that works for you, whether it be talking, just being together, reminiscing and telling stories, sharing an activity or a meal, whatever works. Um, and when our stress levels are low, this can be time also to focus on um, our goals and doing things to improve our skills or knowledge and things that give us a sense of self-efficacy and mastery again. This can be training, being creative, team sports, working on various projects and things like that. So these are just examples of ways that we can respond to that question of what do I need when my SUDS is at a certain level. So one of the things that you might want to think about including in your shifting gears routine is time for processing. The first thing is we want to acknowledge when there is something that needs to be processed. And signs that this might be the case include feeling agitated, feeling anxious or upset, or dwelling on events from the day. We want to allow time, which is really just about making space for processing. And this is whatever works or is most appropriate for you. So whether you set aside a certain amount of time um, in the drive home from work, or if in the transition between home work duties and home duties. So just making space for it. Might need to actively let go of things that you can't address right away. One example that people use in the commute home is hanging certain things on a tree or a sign that they pass on their way, just mentally putting that there for later. But often writing things down that will need our attention later is a good way of um, freeing our brain, um, freeing our mind so that our brain doesn't have to constantly go back and check and remind ourselves that this needs our attention. Um, and we need to speak up, or as it says here, speak up rather than just suck it up. Often, we get in the habit of just, I'll deal with it. I don't want to burden other people. But we need to acknowledge when we need to reach out for support and outsource our processing to loved ones, friends, or even a counsellor. And this is something that we do to protect our well-being, not just something we think about, because we're broken or not coping. So another thing that we can include in this, ritual or routine as we shift gears between work and home is some kind of breathing exercise. Breathing is really a body hack. Our stress system, many parts of our stress system are out of our direct control, but breathing is one of the things that gives us an in, one of the ways that we can intervene in that system. And, for example, breathing is something that Special Forces soldiers use to regulate themselves in combat. So it can be really helpful in sort of keeping us calm and regulating stress. So breathing is useful because it stimulates the relaxation part of our nervous system. And like any training, the more we do it, the stronger it gets. So our capacity to cope with and bounce back from stress increases with each breathing workout that we do. So if this is something that we do daily as part of our routine, then we're building our resilience actively as we shift between work and home. So one example is to take a 3-minute breathing space. And what this involves is tuning in and locating where what our body's feeling, or where an emotion is sitting within our body. So for example, if we're feeling anxious, we might feel that in our chest. If we're feeling irritated or angry, we might feel that in our arms or in our neck or in our jaw or something like that. So just tuning in, and as we breathe, There's lots of different techniques for breathing, but the key to all of them is just slowing down and making it deeper. We want to imagine breathing the air flowing into that part of the body, breathing into the feeling, and with each breath we can add a little sort of mental saying that can feel containing and make us feel calm and more control. This is just how it is right now. That is a really useful thing to say when we're having a hard time, feeling stressed. This is just how it is right now as we breathe and use breath to soothe the body. So another thing that we can do, there's been a lot of research in recent years around gratitude and using gratitude as a practice to shift, shift how we're feeling at a given time, but also to develop, a positive way of being in the world. So gratitude is an effective way to activate the soothe system that we talked about in part 1 of this module. And it can really change the tone. If there's an agitated or irritated or hurt or stressed tone in our bodies and minds, then doing a gratitude practice is a nice way to shift that. So simple way of doing that is in our transition routine from work and home. It's just stopping for a minute and thinking, what was the best thing that happened today? And just letting our minds kind of touch on what comes up when we ask that question. We may also ask, who or what am I grateful for today? And remember a specific experience that happened during the day that we're grateful for. And a nice way of kind of shifting gears and connecting with home, getting ready to go home, is to ask, what am I looking forward to when I get home? This is something I often do as I'm driving home from work. I think about seeing my daughter, catching up with family at home, and getting into the home routine, maybe doing something to recharge. And just, it shifts the tension and the tone in my body when I think about that. So again, just linking back to the stress and burnout module, just want to remind you that stress is a dynamic system. And it's a balancing act between the demands that are put on us, the amount, intensity, and type of demands or stresses in our life, and balancing that with the resources that comes with our health and fitness, our coping skills, and importantly with social support. So we need to balance our resources with the demands that are placed upon us, and this is constantly shifting. So more demands means we need to give more attention to resources. So this is particularly important. We need to give extra attention to our supports and resources when we're transitioning after a challenging or stressful day, or days when critical incidents occur in the workplace. So we may need to negotiate around other demands, and this is a balancing act again between needs and demands. On hard days, our needs have to get more of the balance and be given more priority wherever possible. So, we do the same self-check-in using SUDS to gauge where am I at, what's my SUDS level, what do I need, and being flexible and responsive to that. Reminding ourselves that it's natural and normal to be impacted by a hard day on the job, and that this is nothing to be ashamed of. And again, we need to speak up rather than suck it up. We making our needs a conversation, and it's okay to ask for people to give us a bit of leeway when we've had a hard day at work, because our first job is to look after ourselves. And we always have this analogy of on a plane in an emergency, we're told to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first before we can help other people. It's a good analogy to think about in terms of when we're transitioning on stressful days. So one of the tricky parts of transitioning on hard days is how we compartmentalize what's happened without withdrawing from our family. And this is really about the boundaries that we put around sharing. It's natural to want to protect our family when critical or traumatic events occur, but this can sometimes come at the expense of getting the support that you need, or at the expense of our connection with our loved ones. So it's really about, putting the focus on describing the impact on me rather than sort of giving the nitty-gritty details of the story. It doesn't have to be either or. We can do both by establishing these appropriate boundaries around what we share. So shifting the focus from the story to the impact on you. And some really simple examples of how you can do that is, simply by saying, I had a rough day today and it's left me feeling a bit raw. Or something happened today at work that's left me feeling sad, angry, or confused. Choosing whatever word fits the emotion that might be there. I don't want to talk about the details. I just need you to know that I'm a bit out of sorts. And I'll be okay. I don't need anything. I just need a bit of time. So this is where we can sort of take it to the next level and think about building into our transition routines ways that activate that soothe system that we talked about in part one. And thinking, the best kind of decompression strategies don't just reduce stress, but they also boost our mood and our well-being and our connection to others in our lives. So, just thinking back to part one where we looked at these 3 emotion and motivation systems that have evolved in us, remembering that each system is like a muscle and the ones that we use the most get bigger and stronger. And we really want to focus on building the soothe muscle to help us to metabolize stress. That's essential for helping us to deactivate what comes with the threat and the drive systems. So the good news, though, is that that's really not complicated. It's not rocket science, and it's really just about tapping into natural things that activate our soothe system. Remembering from the stress and burnout module that ways that we can do that are building into our work to home routine stuff that turns on the taps to help us manage stress and stop it building up. So remembering that resources don't just help drain the stress out of the bucket, they actually make us stronger. They make the bucket stronger and more able to cope with day-to-day life with a clearer mind and without being in a state of overwhelm. So here we have 6 kind of natural ways that we can activate the soothe system and build things into our daily routines that help us build that soothe muscle. So slowing down is, literally about stopping to smell the roses. Could be just sitting or breathing, just taking time to be still. Nature, connecting with nature is just good for us. There's lots of research that shows that being in nature or having access to nature, for example, hospital rooms that have a view, access to seeing nature outside, even if it's just the sky, people who are in hospital rooms with a view tend to recover better than those who don't. And it's particularly helpful if we do something that helps us get into rhythm with nature, something like gardening or fishing. Gentle physical activity helps us deactivate the stress system and helps our body recover from stress. Taking a stroll, stretching, yoga, doing Tai Chi or something like that. Crying is the body's natural way of switching on the relaxation system. It's something we can feel embarrassed about, but when we think about it in technical or mechanical terms, it's really just as natural as sneezing when there's something irritating our nose. Fun and laughter is really about quality time, um, doing things. This is a really powerful way of activating the stress system. It's a good antidote to stress and helps boost well-being. And finally, hugs. 20 seconds, research shows, is of a good hug is enough to release oxytocin, which is the feel-good hormone, that our care and connect hormone. And hugs with pets can be just as good as hugs with people. But just remember that it's really about getting the dose. If we have a high dose of stress in our lives, then we need to get an appropriate dose of these activities, this good stuff, to match that. Finally, just a list, we'll go through a quick list of examples of switchover rituals that we can build into our daily routine. One of the things is setting a switchover point. I had a colleague who had a particular tree that he set on his drive home, and that was the point where he deliberately and consciously stopped thinking about the workday and shifted into thinking about home. A welcome home hug, getting into the habit of, if you're coming home, greeting, being greeted or greeting a family member with a warm hug is a really nice, simple thing to build into our routine because our brains like to feel welcomed. Changing clothes is a really important symbol of transitioning from work to home mode, unplugging from work devices, turning off notifications and things like that so we can be fully present at home, listening to music or podcasts, anything that's enjoyable or creates a mental break from work. Physical activity, doing something, even just a brief walk, a stretch, short exercise, really helps to kind of reset. Connecting with pets, another great way to unwind, or doing some outdoor activity, even if it's just briefly sitting outside, playing in the yard with kids or pets, doing some gardening or spending time in a nearby park. Really helpful to decompress from the workday. And one final example is just having a formal family check-in, whether it be at mealtime, where each family member takes some time to share things about their day. And this is where we can build something like a gratitude practice into our family check-in as well. So once again, I've made these slides into a PDF so that you can download them and keep them as a reference. But here are a few main points to remember. We want to build routines and rituals about tuning into and looking after our needs, and we can use a SUDS check-in as a way to start doing that. Increasing the buffer between work and home and actively decompressing, particularly on hard days, and focusing on activities that activate and build that muscle of the soothe system. So again, asking and checking in, how stressed am I feeling? What's my SUDS? And what do I need? How do I respond to how I'm feeling? So thanks again for watching part 2 of this module on shifting gears between work and home life. Again, we'd really appreciate your feedback, so please use the QR code or the link on this slide to fill out a short survey. And feel free to reach out to your wellbeing staff or the team at Fordham if you have any questions about this presentation. Thanks again and take care.